Hello, everybody, from the beautiful city of Cochabamba. Wonderful to see you all.
Take your time to see everybody on the other pages if you want to. Yeah.
If my internet starts to be weird, send me a message or something. You all are looking a little choppy. Well, it is really nice to be back. I thought I would just share a little picture of where I've been. I was on retreat for a month here in this little cottage outside of Sucre. It's about an hour outside of Sucre. This little dog here and this little cat became my well-fed friends for a little while.
I don't see the picture. Oh, there it is. Great.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it was slow. Yeah. There we go. Let's see. You get a little sense of the mountains. Let's see. Where's the? There we go. My coffee view in the morning. Anyway, really beautiful, very dry. A real serious drought, of course, happening. Well, like in a lot of places. So sometime I'll share more pictures, maybe some stories. But yeah, it was good to sit as usual. The ups and downs that you all know. And yeah, glad to be back with you all and traveling a little more. I'm here in Cochabamba for a couple more days, and then I head to La Paz for a few days in Bolivia, and then back to Ecuador for the last chunk of my trip before I'm back in Hawaii in December. All right. So can you hear me okay? The sound is coming through okay?
Yes.
Michelle, yes. Okay.
They all say yes.
No one's moving on my screen. I'm going to change mine to speaker view for the time being. There we go. Okay, great. All right, let's sit for a little bit. So coming into your seated posture. With some sense of that balance of relaxation and dignity. Noticing what naturally comes to the forefront of your attention. What experiences in the realms of sound, sight, smell, taste, the body, experiences of the heart and mind. And then what is the response to these phenomena, these observations? Do we notice the mind clinging, rejecting, ignoring? Caring? Receiving with clarity, tenderness? curiosity, judgment. We have so little time with each experience, even when they seem persistent, seem so solid. We sit, we notice their fleeting nature, and the brief time we have to interact with every sound, every thought. Every fluttering of the heart, every image that passes through the mind. Sometimes we can feel the weight of that responsibility. The pressure to receive each moment with clarity and kindness. But also recognizing that more pressure, more tension won't help. So we also have to find our way to relax. And receive whatever we can become aware of. As imperfect as our attention may be. We receive sounds. We receive the body, the breath. Trying to find some concurrence with our attention. Some concurrence of care. Whether we approve of the experiences or not. And sometimes it's important to know that we can alternate between modes with a sense of caring that we can develop toward sound, toward the body. We do recognize that it does have its own flavor of experience, sometimes different than simply observing. When we attune to the preciousness of these moments of life experience streaming by, and the worthiness of all phenomena to be cared for, just like all beings are worthy of being cared for. We can feel the goodness of that caring in our hearts. Less attuned to observation and more feeling into the tenderness we may have for whatever sounds are arising, what they reflect about the world around us, presence of others, the presence of natural phenomena. And we feel a sense of tenderness toward all that is heard. And we receive the body with this softness and caring. And we reflect on the worthiness of other beings to be cared for. Perhaps there is a sense of specific beings, people, animals in our lives, for which we naturally feel an affection, a well-wishing, softening of the heart. And we allow the heart to share this sense of kindness with these beings. Wishing them well, wishing for their safety, their ease, their happiness. Perhaps the sense is more general for beings in all of the directions around us, beings we are aware of, beings across the world. We have a sense of their worthiness for our care. The movement of the heart is valuing their lives, their happiness, their safety. And we feel the goodness of that in our own hearts. And there is a moment of connection with caring. Do we feel any softening, any relief? Do we receive that goodness in our own bodies, our own hearts, mind? Putting down of our habitual defenses and receiving that healing and beautiful quality of loving kindness, metta. Simple, tender, well-wishing. May all beings be safe, happy, healthy, at ease. And this beautiful quality of heart doesn't need to be in contradiction with the mindfulness practice. We can watch the intention of the thought. May all beings be happy. Feel the caring. Notice the imagining in the mind. Notice the experience in the body. The reciprocal experience in the heart. And watch it dissipate And then in another moment, we can remember our care for this body, this breath, care for specific beings, loved ones, care for all beings, and then watch the experience in the body, watch the experience in the mind, watch it fade away. And there are ways of practicing loving kindness where we keep building the momentum, finding that thread, keeping the pulse of that care. And there's ways of practicing where we find that thread, we connect with the love, and we watch it dissipate like all phenomena, and then find our way back to caring, and then receive the truth of impermanence. So taking this time to explore these two beautiful paths of practice, how they support each other, how they weave together to develop both love and wisdom. Each moment caring, the next moment observing, letting go, watching the mind and body that generated these wishes disappear, and then taking responsibility to generate them once again, find our way to love and find our way to the truth.
one thing I just
Mm,
like to say is we haven't taken any questions for 4 weeks because we did the Metta Karuna Mudita Upeka. So I know you've been practicing these four and probably have questions about that and about Jesse's instructions. So um, we're going to do questions today. So, and
yeah.
Jesse, I didn't know if you had anything else to say, but I wanted to remember that.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. I do want to just say a little about that with the instructions I just gave. I had forgotten that it's like a very particular technique that Mahasi Sayadaw taught. It's in his book on the Brahma Viharas, um, that I was, referring to on my retreat, and it's so powerful. I just feel like there's something so amazing about the willingness to try to practice that way, because it's not the focus of how Brahma Viharas tend to be, the metta and the others tend to be taught in terms of the tradition, um, or the way that mindfulness is usually taught, Vipassana is usually taught in terms of the tradition. And there's something so amazing about this willingness to try to connect with metta in one moment and then watch it disappear in the next moment, and go back to Vipassana, and then go back to metta and go back to Vipassana. And so I just want to say a few things about some of what I think is so powerful about it. I don't think I've ever taken a Pilates class, but I feel like it's a little bit like there's that thing of like, how am I supposed to do both of these things at the same time, right? You're like, it feels a little bit like a workout, sitting in that way, because when you can connect with the metta, it feels so good. And there is a very powerful kind of compulsion to keep it going, as hard as we know that is, when we're really trying to practice metta or the karuna mudita upeka, we know how hard it is to actually try to get that continuity going. But to renounce any attachment to that right away, and to watch it dissolve, watch the feeling of metta dissolve in the mind, whatever feelings might be reciprocal in the body, whatever we're noticing in terms of mind and body, to watch those things dissolve right away is it's a very powerful renunciation. Sometimes it's also relief, right? Because we can get so fixated on feeling like you need to keep metta going. You're supposed to be building it. It's supposed to be growing. Whereas here, there's like no expectation of that. This sense of like, you feel it, you feel the goodness of it, you trust the wholesomeness of it, but you're also willing to see it as constructed, as work, as karma. And there's something really, there are several things that are just really important about that in terms of like really seeing it is a countermeasure to some degree of this notion that love just like exists, and that we kind of tune into it, right? That love is just there as this universal sort of like baseline phenomena, and that we're just sort of tuning into it. This practice is in part demonstrating that that is not true, that it is a generated force of the heart, of the mind, that it takes volition to cultivate it and to generate it, and that we can do that, and how amazing that is. And what we can see is like what a powerful raft that starts to create, what a powerful buoyancy of heart and mind. And yet how important it is to see it as constructed. And why is it that our lives are not just in this natural flow of the river of love, uh, all day long, all year long, right? You see that it's like, oh, it's because it takes actually a lot of energy to be generating that. And and the force that it takes, if you really were trying to create a raft out of that love, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of determination, it takes a lot of willpower, and a lot of beautiful force, and that it's possible, but that it also takes a lot of work. And you see why our lives are not necessarily primarily dominated by that force, and perhaps maybe why the world isn't, right? We see the incredible effort it takes in the heart and the mind to actually be living in that way. And then we also see the fragility of it, the importance of also the impermanence of that raft, and how important it is to also not be attached to it, to be able to come back into an ungenerated receptivity of life as it's unfolding, and the lessons of that. So anyhow, there's more to say on it, but I do think it's an important approach to these two practices that is worth integrating into our general practice life. Yeah. So yeah, as Michelle said, we have some time for questions, and if you have a question, let's see if it's still on the reactions. Oh no, look at that. Yes, if you put reactions on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little raise hand button. A bunch of other buttons have changed on my screen since I was last with you. Can you hear me?
It got a little,
Michelle?
your voice got a little not as clear, but I don't think you can control
Okay.
it. Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I can control it. Yeah. I can't control. There's also a pizza restaurant underneath me, and that might be some of the other sounds you
The
may be
Bol-
hearing
the
during our time together.
the Bolivian soundtrack. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but when I first came to South America, I was maybe like 12 or so. We visited my family in Ecuador, and we went to Peru, and I was like dying for pizza. And boy, you couldn't find good pizza anywhere. It was like a bad experience after bad experience. My parents were like, "Why do you keep trying this? Just like eat what we're eating." I was like, "No." And now there's like delicious pizza everywhere. This is like some of the best pizza you've ever had. So things have changed. If you have any questions, raise your Zoom hand, or you can type in the chat that you have a question, and we'll call on you.
Even if you have a comment on how the last 4 weeks have gone with the Brahma Viharas in your daily life. We did a big experiment, so it'll be interesting to see questions or how it went, and how this new way might work for you, but you might have to practice it for a while to see how it goes.
Hey, Samantha. Let's see, can you unmute yourself?
Hello. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yeah.
Hi, Samantha.
I have a question. Not quite sure how to phrase it, but I'll try. It's a question about practice, but it's kind of intertwined with a lot of theoretical reflection about effort, and kind of got re-triggered during your guided meditation today, Jesse. So I'm sitting as much as I can. I have some back issues, some physical issues, and I've been doing a lot of self-retreats. And I think I've talked to both of you about how intense the practice can get sometimes. And I got some really good guidance on taking breaks and taking refuge in, I think the way you put it, Michelle, is taking refuge in common daily awareness instead of really deep quiet, which I'm very attached to. But my question is more about fate and paramis, I think. So I try really hard, and then sometimes there is this really intense doubt that I'm not trying hard enough. But I am trying the best I can. I do believe that. But then I feel stuck in fate. Like, okay, no matter how hard I try, if my paramis aren't strong enough to allow me to something in my practice, I don't even know what that something is, then why do I try so hard? Is this making any sense to either of you?
Yes.
So I can talk more, but if you think it's enough, any guidance?
I have an immediate
Yeah.
response, and I'm sure Jesse and I can do it, but I think what I love about this practice is that the purification of the motivation is foolproof. So there's levels to doubt and faith, and how the faith is not, the faith in this context of what you're acting is not being based on attachment to result, because then it wouldn't be faith.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think you're getting tripped up, is that doubt was a hindrance of choice for me. I mean, it was a big one for me in terms of right effort and what you're saying. So whenever I had the thought, I'm not working hard enough, it was inevitably because I wanted my experience to be different than what it was. And so if you could control that, you wouldn't be developing faith.
Mm-hmm.
This is essential to untangle, because if you can control your experience, then why would you need faith? I mean, you wouldn't need it. If faith is based on the result of attachment to the result of our effort, forget it. We would all be sunk. And one aspect of working with this is that when that kind of a thought comes, it's very important in the present moment to deal with it. Just like to really look at it and go, it's just like it takes a fierceness, because it's your this is a hindrance of choice for you. This is like a karmic knot that's tripping you and tripping you and tripping you, and it's like the light bulb has to go on and go, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. What do I have faith in here? Is it the result of the effort, or the result of the attachment to the result of the effort? That's what you have to untangle. Because the effort we make when the motivation is pure, that's what develops faith. The parami is the pure effort of like making the effort to eradicate greed, hatred, and delusion is a noble effort, and something you would have more and more faith in. To be attached to the result of the effort is to have faith in that would be having faith in attachment. Thank God we can't control it. Otherwise, it would be cultivating more and more attachment. And so this is meant to get harder, Samantha, not easier. This is meant to get harder and harder in terms of this particular knot, because you're meant to be actually seeing it much more clearly, the attachment and the entanglement with the right effort. And you even said, I don't even know what I want.
That's right. So I can't adjust it. It's very clear.
So that's pure wanting. That's getting to look at wanting itself, attachment, without the object of the attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How wonderful. That is what I would recommend having faith in.
Not knowing?
No, seeing that attachment more and more clearly. It's going to get more clear and clear and clear. That's how you get free. You don't get free by it all just disappearing into the sunset and being fully enlightened. It happens by another layer of it and another layer of it, and like really being it's supposed to hurt.
Okay.
No, I know you're doing good, so I'm being hard on you because you're doing good. I wouldn't be so strong with you if I didn't know you are in the right place to hear it. You're so in this knot right now, Samantha. It's awesome. It's like, way to go, Samantha.
See the smile on my face?
It's humbling. Man, this is humbling. You can't. The ego is not gonna make this happen. Not gonna happen. Thankfully.
But you can make yourself not want it. I mean, that's the thing. You just like Michelle's saying, you have to go through it. You have to feel the wanting, and you have to be honest about it, and you have to really like you stop buying into it and you stop fighting it, but you have to acknowledge it and feel it, because it's the wanting that's the thing. And again, you're saying, the object is irrelevant. You might think that it's wanting this or experience, but it's just wanting. And if that is the hardest thing to feel, and it's the willingness to feel it and the ache of it and the pain of it and the agony of it and identification with it, that it's like, if that that's where it is. And so it's great. It's right there. You have it, and yet you think it's the problem. And it's like, of course, so it's just like, how do you turn it? It's just like that little shift, being like, the thing that you think is the problem is your key, it's your ticket. So yeah, everything Michelle said. I think it's also, I was, the story that Steve has shared about when Sayadaw Lakana was passing away in Burma, and he was at his bedside in the hospital, and Steve is very sad, as understandably as it could be, and this great being was going to pass, and someone he loved and appreciated and had been very kind to him, and they collaborated together, and all these things you can imagine why you might be sad that someone's going to die. And Sayadaw just said to him, he said, don't worry, Steve. Don't worry, Stephen. I have total confidence in my karma. You just think about that. You think about someone whose whole life is dedicated to practice, and we'll just say that at that point would have said, that he was not an arhat, right? And that you might imagine that would be disappointing, right? That you might encounter a little doubt at that point in your life, and yet
You think?
he was just like, no, like this sense of like total confidence, of just like, you can't total confidence in the goodness of his actions and in the goodness of what he's tried to do, and like the total security that they will will grow, that they will blossom, they will fruit, in the time that is out of our control, and so there's this metaphor that you hear of like of a farmer, that it's like, that the sun is out of your control, that the rain is out of your control. These are forces that are beyond your immediate ability to do anything about. And yet you still have to plant the seed, you still have to weed, you still have to care for these plants, and the pace at which they develop, the timing of the flowering is totally out of our control. And yet it won't happen if you don't tend them, right? If you aren't helping support and doing all of the things that you're doing. And so it's like, it is a paradox, and it's the paradox that is the purification, how to act without attachment to outcome. I mean, that's it, right? And so that's what the heart is learning. It's stretching. It's as Michele said, it gets harder and harder because it's more and more pure. The pain of that, the tension of that in the heart. Great.
I just want to also add it.
Oh, your microphone, Michelle's a little.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now? It's all right.
Yep.
We just did a week of equanimity, and so often when you're doing equanimity, you see more aversion and attachment. That's why people don't like equanimity practice, because it's purifying, right? And so you just did a deep retreat where you had a lot of equanimity.
Yeah.
And so the purification is going to be seeing you're going to see when the equanimity goes and the attachment arises, then of course it's going to be seen much more clearly, and it's going to hurt. The contrast between the absence of attachment, equanimity feels wonderful because there's no aversion or attachment. And so when the attachment comes back and there's not enough equanimity to go, ha 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 ha. Oh, I was hoping attachment would come up because I want to know more about how to have a relationship with attachment. Now I can say that to you hundreds of times, that what's important is that when it comes up, that you go, oh boy, I was hoping I could get another chance to know how to work with attachment, right? But usually when equanimity is fading, we have no interest in it because the equanimity's gone. But we remember we were just having it where we were not bothered by anything. And then we're bothered by the attachment, and then your doubt is going to hit like crazy. That's great, yeah.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
Always.
Arlene?
Where did Arlene go? I lost her. Oh, there you are. Great.
Oh, you have to unmute there. Let's see.
Okay.
There you go.
I've been having a lot of sadness, and it's sadness through the day, but it's also much more sadness when I'm meditating. And there are reasons for the sadness, and there have been a lot of losses. And usually in my life, in the past, and the karmic knot is that I do something to make it better. I try this, or I try that, or I try this, or I try that.
You mean in your life or in
my life? I mean, I was, I was the one who did that, and I was the family therapist who taught other people how to not do that. And so what? In terms of my regular meditation, I've been doing it, and I'm concerned that both of you are going to say what you've said to me before, Arlene, you're doing it right. Okay, when I'm meditating, and not only when I'm meditating, when I'm in my life and when I'm walking, um, I'm uh, I'm aware of this feeling in my body, okay, which at this point I know it's sadness, and I can open, I open to it, and there it is, and it's hard being with it because in addition, whatever the trauma was, which happened a couple of years ago, keeps on, comes in thought. Okay, I catch the thought, you know, and there's, and then there's the sadness, whether you call it grief or whatever. And there's an awareness that probably this is going to be with me. And but what I've noticed, and in terms of trying to distract myself, which I can do, but I guess as a meditator, I feel judgmental about okay, let me listen to your problem, which people call me all the time about, or I've even, with everything that's happening in the world, it's like, okay, I can get involved with this problem. And there's an element of where I see that as distraction, or my whole view is, well, human beings, forget about them. All we need is, the earth could do well without us. So I could get into that, but underneath, I know it's what's really happening for me is this feeling of loss and sadness. And so, when I hear equanimity, or when I hear other people, sleep would be good, or whatever. So, so what can you? And I have it today, in the city. It's like, okay, I don't even have the thoughts; I have the feelings. And I did, and I thought a long time before even asking you this question. So there it is.
Yeah.
Don't tell me
I
I'm
love that.
doing
I
it
love that your
right. Don't
distractions,
you
all your
dare tell me
examples.
I'm doing it right.
You're doing it great. That's excellent. I
I,
have to say,
I,
I
yeah,
love that your distractions are all like getting involved in negative things, like other people's negative things or the
yeah, and
world.
I'm very helpful.
Or, yeah, that's an interesting technique. Yeah.
I can help you with your problems,
Yeah.
Jesse.
I mean, I'm sure, again, I know Michelle and I will both have something to say. There are things to be sad about.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I guess I don't, the part about being sad or having sadness arise and feeling it in the mind, feeling it in the body, like there's nothing obvious, right? Obviously, right? This is not a sense that there's something wrong in that. What I understand is the oppressiveness of that, right? Of this sense that it's like, it's so pervasive and that you feel like you don't have an escape from it. And, that is just really hard. So I don't, there's no way around that. And there's no way around that there are things that can happen in our lives and things that can happen in our world, our family systems, or whatever, that are like incredibly painful and incredibly difficult and are not just easily resolved in the dynamics around us or in our own hearts. and bodies, you know. So, and especially as you're saying, it's like they're not getting resolved, and they're, you know, things keep getting kind of brought up and triggered, and you know, so I think this sense of what is your expectation of the practice? What is your expectation of the mind? What is your hope for the mind in terms of being able to manage these things? And I think there's like a healthy distrust of being too happy or too at ease given the truth of these things, you know. So I mean, I think that there's like that sense of like, you know, some of us are more oriented towards the unpleasant, or some are more oriented towards grasping to the pleasant. And you know, you know, you have more of that sort of orientation where it's like you're not going to trust the kind of Pollyannish, it's okay, in your own heart, right? And so uh and yet you want the relief of that feeling, you know, and you want the relief of having some space from it. So I mean, on one hand, I don't feel like we're going to say anything too much different than what we said in the past, and that like you are doing a good job, and that you're trying, you know, the tools you have. In terms of what I would maybe recommend is okay. So there is the like, what is, there's like, I'll say three things and we'll let Michelle. There's the like, okay, investigating quote unquote sadness. What is this? So when you said you feel it in your body, it's like, well, okay, that's a good place to start. Is the physical experience the same as the emotion? Because sometimes it feels like it is. The tradition would technically say it's not. What is it like to investigate this? Where is the mental emotional experience? What are thoughts? What are images? What are emotions that are outside of that? What is the relationship with that parts of the body? What is the sort of dynamic of that? Might be an interesting place when you have the wherewithal and sort of strength to explore it. It's just like, okay, well, what is this? You're in the sadness soup. What's it made of? And you check it out. And because you're not going to get out of it and you're not going to deny it, you're going to go into it. So that's the like investigative part of it. Now that's really hard. And if you're not doing it with a lot of equanimity or a lot of care, when that isn't available, it's going to be more and more draining. That's just the way it is. It's going to, because you don't want the sadness, and because you are attached to certain outcomes, and you are resentful, and you're all of these things, it's going to, getting involved in the soup is going to be draining when you don't have these things.
But
yeah, wait.
I'm calm with it. I'm
okay.
calm with the sadness. But it also makes, you know, when I'm feeling it in my body, and I'm with the feelings and the sensations, and the thoughts are not there. And I think it goes back to the karmic knot of that I'm supposed to do something to make this different.
Or do something about it, right? Well, yeah.
You know, I mean, you know,
I like that you I almost heard you say comic knot, like in like COMIC, which I actually think is a good way of thinking about it. Right.
It's the Boston accent.
Yeah, the comic knot. Yeah.
Like New York.
Right, whatever. So okay, so you've got, yes, exactly. It's very, so you're calm with it is great. And then there is that thing of like, what is the relationship between calm, a genuine factor of awakening, and investigation, which is a different quality of mind of like, okay, well, what's happening with the feelings that are changing, the physical sensations that are changing, the mental emotional experience, just like what's the dynamic there. So there's the calm, and then there's the investigation. So that's one thing to sort of just get a little sense of. Then there is what you said you've already which is the like getting out of it, right? You push away the thoughts at times. You try to concentrate on something that is not the sadness and that is not the physical sensations related to the sadness. Now that's hard, but it's also a good training for the mind. It's part of why concentration is valued. And there are the times where concentration away from the whirlpool is an important skill to learn. And it's hard, and it may only work for a few moments, but it's there. And there's something about that. It's like, well, what if you just go to sound? What if you just go to sound, right? It's like you're not going into the body, you're not going into the emotions, you're attuning to the world of sound and you're just noticing sound. And it's probably not as interesting as all that's happening in the body. It doesn't feel as important. And so you're gonna have to like work with this sense of like, why am I valuing this compared to this thing that feels so important? But it's a training and you do that, right? So there's the going to the soup, there's the getting out of the soup, and then there's like the distractions, but that are not terrible, unpleasant distractions. There's like, what about things that might be joyful, right? Like things that might be like make you happy, right? And I know that's also hard because it feels like not real and it feels like not like the practice and but this sense of like, where do you give your mind some relief from the dukkha? And so whatever that looks like in terms of a book or a movie or getting out or music, entertainment, like there's something about like maybe more in the realm of human culture where you find some way out of it, right? Where you're just or just TV, like a show that you like, something that just gets your mind out of the whirlpool of it. And that with those sort of tools, those are like an important kind of threefold kit, Michelle, what do you think?
You're doing terrible.
Oh God.
How's that?
God, Michelle.
Oh no. I think that you have pointed to the knot, but it's like another way to look at that knot is that your identity has been mother and a person who's gluing the family together and a family therapist who's also gluing families together, right? No, I'm just saying you have this very deep identity, and I don't think that. Well, I would ask you to look at is being sad outside the framework of that.
No, it's not.
So there's a control issue here, right? Like, which is Jesse has talked about it, and I don't need you.
Right.
You're aware of it, but I heard something that Marion Woodman said. She's dead now, but the great psychologist, Jungian psychologist from Toronto. She said when she hit the crone years, the crone, she had to start to let go of the mother in her. And it was the most difficult part of her path.
Okay.
So I would like you to really take that in because it's very hard. I am in it myself, and the identity with the mother is so much stronger than an identity with the crone. Of course, women don't get a lot of strokes for the crone.
Right.
But I would say just even for any of us to even understand what that is even would be a miracle. So this is not a light task, but I think it's maybe an angle into it because all of your even genetics, thousands of years are going to go into you not doing what I'm suggesting. And I do see it as a light in it all that might help.
Well, it's interesting because I think that there's an element of if I'm suffering, I'm still the mother.
If what?
If I'm suffering,
Right.
if I'm sad, that I'm still the mother who's sad about, I'm still the family, whatever.
Exactly.
I'm still in it. And to put it down seems selfish. It seems to be and I'm doing it in other ways, like not having the third piece of candy where nobody says I can't have candy. My weight is not my problem. And I'm doing it in other ways where I'm kind of like, I should. Um, there's an element is that a mother would suffer.
Exactly. And that's really deep. This is not just your lifetime. This is thousands of years of conditioning. And what this teaching can help you with is to see it as conditioning, and to see that, at least to start questioning that in a way that would give you like start to unstick from it, because that the freedom isn't necessarily that the sadness isn't the problem here, it's the stickiness of it or the resistance to it. And I think that that ultimately is what you can learn in this, that I'm going through a very intense time around sadness and caregiving and all that. And like, I just like walk into the bank and this lady I knew there said, "How are you?" And I started crying, right? Like that's how intense it is, right? And I'll be standing there like, oh, like I don't want to be crying here in the, with this lady. Like, it's like, but it's just my heart is so soft, but it's also sad a lot. And if somebody looks at me and says, "How are you?" It happens. Not all the time, but sometimes, and I can't control it right now. But it's like as I walk out, I'll be looking at like accepting the sadness, accepting the sadness, accepting the sadness. It's like it's okay. I don't know where I have it in my head that somehow it's not okay. Why isn't this? Why isn't it's totally understandable, right? But it's like somehow it's okay at 10 o'clock at night as I'm getting ready for bed. Like that's when sadness is
Right.
okay, right?
And if you're alone,
Right, exactly.
because you're imposing your sadness on other
Yep,
people.
yep,
You
yep.
know,
And in actual fact, I don't find that many people in that context that really want me to be sad. It's not like it's being reinforced that it's not that socially acceptable, right? So there's a reason why we have all this conditioning.
So it's really, both of you are being helpful to me around this. And thank you. I'm going to work on it. I'll get myself a piece of chocolate candy.
Which
Anyway,
is,
it's interesting that I guess there is an element where I feel that I can continue to be mother, besides wishing them well and everything else, if I suffer. And, and knowing my kids, they'd rather me be happy than suffering, as well as my husband. So now all I have to do is, I feel like it's okay to be okay, but I can practice it and watch how difficult it is to be
Right.
good to myself. And you too can do that.
right, right. And I think that that's where that learning is like the equanimity, which is, not your favorite word right now, but that being able to be okay and to not be okay, right? Like that they're both, like to be able to start to see that they're both okay,
Right.
and that's the work. And it's really a lot of people have a lot to learn from what you're saying, because that attachment to thinking it's not okay in these kind of circumstances to be okay is huge. It's huge.
Thank you.
Hmm.
And I will say for other folks, I mean, this thing that Michelle is this notion of being that all of us have to be so careful about being stuck in an archetype. That is our karmic knot. I mean, it's so related. It's where these things do sort of like have so much conversation with each other, these kind of different modalities, and how hard that is. How like fundamentally we tend to see the world through certain frameworks that are really deep, and how important that work is of liberating ourselves from it, for ourselves, and like you said, for everyone around us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Before Annie, I know Dan had raised your hand at some point. Do you still have a question, Dan?
There you are. Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. So I had the unusual experience of going to New York the last few days, and it was cool because such a busy place, so many towers compared to my little quiet place in the country here. So anyhow, I went to the Tibetan Museum. It's called the Reuben blah 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 Museum, and there on the fourth floor was this thing that it was on anger, and it was from a Tibetan point of view. And what was fascinating was they said that it's actually a mirror emotion where it's quite, if you are an adept, if you can look at that, the clarity and the strength of that anger emotion, I guess this is my interpretation, and I'm hoping you reinforce it, is that it provides an entry point for interest into, like, because it elevates your presence, because anger is so strong when it's on, um, and if you watch it, it becomes a very cool place to get insight. And I thought, well, fuck, I spend a lot of time in anger, and is this actually an asset to me rather just than a source of distress? About, you name it. My pontifical daydreams are just enormous, and they go on forever. It's the same thing over and over again, year after year. And so, but it was just such a surprising idea. And so I don't need you to go off on a tangent. People have other questions that might be more in line with what's happening. So we can talk about it another day too.
Right. Anger isn't that important.
Yeah, it's like whatever.
Jesse, I have two brief things that
Yeah.
you're talking to people
Yeah, this
who
is like,
we're like, this is the gold mine here. Just in terms of the Buddhist teaching and personality types, like the aversion type, the faith type, the deluded type. The aversion type is said to develop wisdom more easily and quickly because of the aversion. And so, yes, it's like because the aversion type is so sensitized to unpleasant and not liking it, right, or being afraid of it, whatever, that hyper kind of vigilance around the unpleasant is motivating. It's there, if you can harness it, yeah, it's like it's that ability to be able to investigate. That's the whole teaching in Vipassana for an aversion type, is being able to get relaxed enough to be able to receive the input and be interested in it. Exactly. Investigation. Yep, that's it. And the second thing I want to say about it, because I feel like what's so important is that seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, all the objects of the attention are information to discern. That's also what we learn in Vipassana, is that whatever is appearing can be discerned, not rejected, right? Not indulged. It's like there's a discernment that happens. And so with difficult emotions, we're not trying to get rid of them. We're trying to actually receive the information, right? Including the content of the thought, but including the unpleasant, the Vedana. We're receiving it and discerning, right? And how do you discern? Well, through investigation. So that's the short answer. Now, how you do that now Jesse might want to develop more than I can, but it's like, yes, it's like you go from that interest to investigation to discernment, and then you can make use of it. You have to do something with the investigation, though. It's like a discernment of understanding what information we're receiving. And it can just be simply a sound, right? But it could be the war, right? It can be all kinds of levels to where aversion can arise.
I have heard that word investigation for almost 30 years from you and Stephen, and I just, when I'm in it, I think, okay, I'm going to investigate this. So I feel like I just sit in this bath of whatever it is. And I say, I'm not going away. I'm just going to sit here in this bath of sadness or anger. And I think, oh, is this investigation? And I think, I don't know what investigation is other than being there with it. And like, how do I, so that is the mystery that I feel I have to solve myself. I think you're pointing it in a direction, and that's the whole point. But it's like, what is investigation? It's like, okay, here's a word, and what does it mean? And oh, okay, I'll try this. And you just, I mean, ultimately it comes back to karmic knots, I guess, and just sitting there long enough that something's going to give, is what I feel,
I can give you a clue.
please.
You pick the easiest sense door.
Mm. Okay. Thank you.
Jesse, you must have something to say about aversion. Come on.
It's the best. Yeah, I mean, this notion. So the just kind of made the expand on what Michele said about what the Visuddhimagga says around, the aversive type has more access to wisdom, right? That discerning quality of mind, that sharpness, that clarity is like such a gift. It's such a tool, right? And yet, of course, it's painful. It's not to deny all the negative sides of it, but and then for the greedy type, that the faith is very accessible, right? And loving kindness is very accessible. For the deluded type, that ease and tranquility and equanimity is sometimes more accessible, right? But what's also interesting to say is kind of pointing a little towards what Michele said, is they say that the aversive type, when they're practicing, needs to be in a beautiful place, needs like really good food, like really needs like a lot of like wonderful, pleasant things around them, right? Whereas the greedy type is supposed to benefit, sorry, folks, from like austerity, right? Like really like bland food and simple, like really simplified things. That's like the purifying thing for them. And for diluted types, really structure is really important, So anyhow, this notion of like, how do you actually use this fiery sword towards liberation versus destruction is it is a lifelong koan, and it's like the same thing that can cause so much harm internally and externally in your life is also the thing that keeps you going and makes you clear about what's right and wrong, and about all of the good things about your heart, and how is it the same tool, and how do we learn to use it in a way that is towards what you want, right? Towards healing and towards, closer to love and closer to this ease of mind versus just like more and more hardness and frustration with things. One thing I would offer in terms of investigation, because investigation can mean different things. There is the side of it, which has to do with like getting out of the concept of fear or of anger or whatever negative things, but just say anger, of like the notion, and just like, what is the direct experience? What are the thoughts that are happening? What are the physical sensations that are happening? What's the emotion? Can you find, where is the emotion even happening? Where is emotion happening in space? is mind happening in space? What is the relationship between these experiences of mind, body, emotion, thoughts, emotions, images, physical experiences? That's the investigation. It's like, what is really going on here outside of the kind of locked framework of the view of like my rightness in this whatever content is there. So there's this sense of like, how are you breaking it down into just like mind and matter in momentary ways? And so the investigation of seeing things dissolve, seeing things interplay with one another. There's also the side of it of like, I would say that all anger, am I going to say that? I don't know if I'm going to say that.
Be careful, be careful.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, whoa. Most anger is rooted in the fact that you care about something. And it's being harmed or it's being threatened or you're worried about it or whatever, right? And what is going on there with that? And why does the mind feel so much safer in anger, stronger? And why does the love not feel protective of them, right? And so that the vulnerability of caring for something that's vulnerable, that's under threat, that's unbearable, that vulnerability is so hard for the heart to bear. That anger is such a great, it's such a good tool, right? It's such a good armor to make us feel strong in the midst of like a lot of vulnerability. And other people might go to addiction or might go to, feeling good, like to get away from it. We're going to have our different, or spacing out or whatever. So we have our different orientations, and it's like this sense of like it's mechanical, like it's actually not that personal is amazing. And you just start to see that it's like, oh, it's just the mind feels fragile, and that this is the way it feels strong, and that there's something beautiful in that, and there's something so painful in that, and there's something so universal in that, and actually impersonal in it. So those would be some recommendations. Yeah.
I want to say anger is so important to talk about, especially now. And I just want to, I'll try to do it quickly, but the place that I learned to investigate it the most clearly was my first 3-month retreat with U Pandita. And there were 20 of us at IMS, just 20. And he introduced writing in a notebook, like your experience of your retreat, like so that you could report it to him. And there were rules. There were rules of like when you were allowed to write in your notebook. And the person next to me in the hall did not follow the rules. And there were people in the hall that weren't following the rules, period. And I noticed my colleagues started to disappear. So they didn't have to put up with that aversion. They just started to go to their rooms and sit in their rooms. And I was stupid enough to ask U Pandita if I was allowed to go to my room. And he said, the meditation teacher should set an example for everyone and stay in the hall. And I probably looked devastated, and I wanted to tattle on my colleagues, but I didn't. And then he looked at me and he said, well, you have to stay in the hall for a month. It was a 3-month retreat. You have to stay in the hall for a month. So.
And she was writing in pencil.
Yeah, she was writing almost constantly during the sittings and with a pencil, and I'm super sensitive to sound. And it got to the point where I would actually know her footsteps coming through the upper walking room. I'd hear her coming, and I would be drenched in sweat. No, I'm not kidding. I would be drenched in dread and sweat. And I tried humor. I kept saying, when I leave this retreat and I tell people I couldn't deal with the sound of a pencil, right? Like they're going to put me away, right? Like it was just like I could tell I was really going over the edge. And it's like, but I would sit there like she was breaking the rules, right? Like that was my first line of defense, like she's breaking the rule. And then I left a pen there. I left a pen there for her, which she didn't get the hint, right? Like, and it was just so, I can't tell you how bad it got. Like, this is like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I'm just like, the thought of her even picking the pencil up, like, was just like, The level of rage was so intense. And it was just like finally getting, what is going on? And it was just finally, I would just be right with the receiving the sound of that. Um, it became like texture. It was like Jesse just said, I'm saying this story for a reason. It's a non-conceptual investigation. And I said, start with an easy sense door. Now, sound in that case wasn't, but for me, I was stuck with the situation, and I started being able to see the Vedana was just unpleasant. It was just unpleasant, and sometimes it turned out that over time, that unpleasantness was okay. Because I could see that it wasn't personal, right? It was just the sound. It was just unpleasant, texture, vibration, non-conceptual. And I'm not saying there's so many levels to it, because actually I had to investigate the aversion itself too. And the aversion itself became texture, vibration, but it's painful. I think that's when we were talking about attachment. Aversion, when you withdraw from the object and you just feel how painful it is in the heart center and how tight it gets, and I'm totally agreeing with Jesse here in terms of mirroring. It's like that. All that is to prevent the vulnerability of that unpleasantness in the heart center and not being able to control her behavior. I absolutely could not control her behavior. I just wanted to go in my room, and I wanted to go with my colleagues because they got to go to their room, and I wasn't allowed. You see, like it would go up into that thought process of like, this is unfair, this is unjust, like this is why do I have to go through this? So I'm just giving you that example because there's something very it's not like she was kicking me, right? Like it's not like she was like, it was like the sound of a pencil, right? But it was because she wasn't supposed to be doing it. I hope this is getting through, like the level of like where my aversion was just like so locked in, and yeah. And it takes enormous compassion too. I think that with all of this, it's just like I didn't know the compassion practice then. Wish I did. So I didn't have that as a tool, but I had a lot of merciless judgment of how angry I was actually. It was, oh, what a month. And then I went to my room. I hope that's helpful, Dan, because it's when we're in it, when we're in the content and we're right, it's hard.
Right. No, I think what you're transmitting is that if you have faith that you look at it, there's something that's going to happen. And
That's a very good way to put it.
It could get worse. It could get better. It could go up. It could go down.
yeah,
That's what we have faith in with observation.
yeah. Cool. Thanks.
By getting better, it doesn't mean getting rid of it. It means understanding it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. So Annie. Oh wait, you just unmuted yourself and then remuted yourself.
Yeah.
Can you? There we go.
Yeah, it's my hands. First, I want to express my gratitude for this group. I just loved everyone's questions and all the answers. It's being so powerful for me. So I thank the Sangha for being here. I don't know that I don't know. I don't know. It's a question. It'll appear at some point. I've noticed all my life that little kindnesses will make me cry when I witness them or when I read about them. And 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 I've been curious about that because it's been very embarrassing. Because I just seem like this really overly sentimental person, and of course that was never something I wanted to be. Um, so I started asking questions about it and being curious. And I thought, is this sadness? And I couldn't see any way that it was sadness. And then when I started to explore the Brahma Viharas, I thought, well, it could be my way of experiencing sympathetic joy. So I've been kind of curious about that. And then I thought, well, but why would that make me cry and feel a sadness? Is it because I don't trust it? Is it because I don't expect kindness from others? Which kind of sounds familiar to me. I have trouble accepting kindness from people who are close friends, and they're always telling me that too. um, so I'm not really sure. But then the other thing that I wanted to say, because I think they're related, is that Jesse, you talked in your comments after the meditation, you said, kindness is not a stream flowing by loving kindness is not a stream flowing by that we tap into and we just or we just put ourselves into the stream. It's something that it is constructed. It's something that's nurtured. And I remember that what came to mind instantly when you said that was that some Buddhist teacher, and I can't remember exactly, but you'll read it in articles in Lion's Roar, and I don't know exactly what the line is, but something is our birthright. You've heard teachers say this, right? Something is your birthright. And I feel like I'm looking for my birthright. And I don't know if those things make sense to you, but it's all part of the soup for me today.
Yeah.
So is there a question there?
Yes, there is. There's
good.
good questions in there. It's a Chogyam Rinpoche's. That is something about the birthright. And it's good, whatever it is. Whatever that birthright is, it's good. I can't remember what the word is either, but
Karma is our birthright. That's what I would say.
But I don't think that's what his quote is.
No, I don't think that's what I was attaching to. I was attaching to there's something good, like my good heart is my birthright, or everybody's good heart is their birthright. That's the kind of thing I was attaching to in that teaching.
Yeah, it's beautiful. In terms of your terrible problem of being moved by kindness. Oh, it's so beautiful. I think I am more interested in the sense. This might feel like an overstatement, but that your investigation of it feels more like an interrogation. And I'm kind of curious about that, of like you said, of like it's been something that that you haven't been comfortable with, in your life. And of course I can understand on some level the reasons why which it might not feel comfortable. But then I think you have a sense that there's something about kindness and connection and generosity that your heart is defended against at other times. And then there's moments where there's just these, openings that are really moving and touching. and maybe sad. I mean, and so I think it's like you're also aware that there's an ache in there. There's something poignant in also the recognition there. And so it sounds, fruitful. I don't want to, I guess what I want to be careful that it's like, I don't want to overstate that word interrogation, because it's like there's also just like you're genuinely interested in this and that you are learning about it. And it really is beautiful. It's kind of like Michelle was saying at the bank. It's like, yes, there are times where it is maybe inconvenient or socially awkward or something like that. And of course, but there is something so beautiful about being moved by simple acts of kindness. And I think that that vulnerability is something that we are all defended against, right? So that you're going to have your personal recipe and your own karmic knot around it, of course, but also to be careful about feeling like that it is only particular to you, that we are all really defended against this sort of vulnerability of being moved by goodness and kindness that we see, and the fragility that might evoke, right? And the sense of how fearful we are of unkindness, and how vulnerable it is to actually feel the goodness of something like that, because you feel undefended on some level from our normal defenses. And yet the question is like, when does that start to feel like a relief? When do we feel that lack of defense, lack of constructed defense around of not attuning to it, or cynicism or whatever, where is the sense of like being touched by something? Where do we see the power of that, right? The spirit, that as actual spiritual power, that is not power over anything, but that is actually has like a very powerful goodness to it that is impactful for our hearts and minds and bodies. But understand why we don't trust it, right? That of course we don't trust it because it feels vulnerable, because we feel maybe undefended in our normal ways of doing that. So it's not to deny or argue against why we have psychological or developed defenses against it. Of course, but also to not totally buy into the non-trusting of it, but that it's hard. You want to do it in a safe way. And so I don't know how often this is sort of happening for you, or you're feeling sort of like exposed, or has it changed over time? I mean, I think it's, Michelle, what's that quote from the Haida Gwaii from Story as Sharp as a Knife?
Which, the blue hole in the heart?
Yeah. It was a bird saying.
The wren.
The wren, yeah. And the one who passed closest to it felt a blue hole in his heart, or something like that, right?
When he heard the song of the bird, he had a blue hole in the heart. I think of it as that receiving. You were touched by the kindness, that you received it, and that relief of the relief of the connection, and it can make us cry. The blue hole in the heart is so poetically evocative of that feeling. Haida Gwaii, wow, that story is extraordinary.
So yeah, I don't know, Michelle, you want to say more, but it's
No,
like
that's
to
it.
understand this sense of like the vulnerability doesn't feel safe. And that's why we're not vulnerable. I mean, that's why we're always defended against it. And so, but to not deny that there's something so beautiful in that opening, and being moved and being impacted, and having that happen. And yet, of course, this fear of like, could I live like this? Like, would I just be a mess? If I was just like always crying of like everything beautiful or whatever, but it's like it doesn't that isn't necessarily how it doesn't necessarily always unfold in even time with equanimity, but that's ultimately how right that being moved and then also being equanimous, that these things do develop over time in conjunction with one another, but they're not always going to happen at the same moment. So it makes sense that there's going to be times where it doesn't happen with perfect equanimity. It happens with other flavors of mind. Yeah, the mudita, as you said.
Mudita, yeah.
I spent my whole first weekend retreat, residential retreat, crying. And the teacher, without knowing me, said, "You're longing for connection." And I thought, how did he know that? I guess this is part of the same thing.
Yes, yeah. But the mudita side of it is very important for you. The gratitude for the kindness and the relief of that, the tears of the relief of receiving the kindness is that vulnerability of that is a way to, you might want to appreciate the mudita.
Yeah, and what you're experiencing is deeper than how you might think about longing for connection.
Yeah, it's deep.
Like when you think about longing for connection, it's like, oh, I want friends. It's just like in that moment there's that the what is happening in terms of connection is beyond the personal, right? It isn't there isn't this sense of me and that. I mean, it's like with the rent, it's just like, no, it's like this kindness is happening. And there is like it's much deeper than a psychological interpretation of it, right? The experience of that, of being touched on that level of by kindness, that is not a personal experience, and it is not a separate experience. It's very important. It's powerful. May we all be touched in that way.
May we all have a blue hole in our heart.
Thank you.
Did you have, it's 4:00 and I didn't know if you had something you can wait till next Sunday to ask or give us a clue.
I put my hand down because I thought Dan's question was so rich, and I wanted to make space for that. It felt just wonderful.
Okay.
And I think I answered my own while thinking about saying it. Yeah, sometime I'll share it. Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, thank you, everyone. Really wonderful. Yeah. Take care of yourselves, your hearts, your holes in your heart, your holes in your head. We'll see you next week. Take care.